than our local cable subscribers.
Okay, this is the Easthampton City Council Ordinance Committee on May 12th, 2026 at 6 p.m. The first thing on our agenda is approval of prior meeting minutes. I didn't remind anyone, and I sort of forgot about making sure that we had meeting minutes for this meeting, but I will follow up with you and make sure that we have those and this one for the next meeting.
I did, yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw him.
Okay, my bad. I was in a meeting, so I might have. So if you guys want to move to approve, I'd be happy to.
I wrote them. Did you want to take a look at that? And if not, we can always do it the next one. So I think that's fine since you haven't had a chance to review them. I think that's probably the prudent thing.
All right, moving on to the next item on our agenda, which is public speak. Is anyone, I don't see anyone in the room with us, but is anyone joining us remotely that would like to speak to something that isn't on our agenda? On. So there are a number of things on the list that I marked that we could talk about tonight. I have an update on the sandwich board signs that I wanted to just go around and figure out where we're at on different things that we were going to look into.
Why don't we start there?
Yeah.
Because I was reviewing it as well, and also just taking a walk, particularly along Union Street, and on the sidewalk there is a business that has multiple sandwich boards out on the street that are just kind of obstructing the walkway. So I certainly think that this is something that, and a few residents have reached out to me and just expressed real concern about that. But I've been not struggling. My understanding is that there's a few different things on the signs ordinance that need to be addressed, and so I've just been looking at the one with the sandwich board. But I do believe that we need to move forward with, if not the entire sign part of this, but certainly the updating the sandwich board more sooner, just because we do have that situation with Union Street in particular.
Yeah.
Maybe you have an update as well. So.
Yeah, so I just reviewed the materials. Like I went back and collected the ordinance, the general ordinance and the zoning ordinance, and tried to read through it and understand what the main issues were. You know, in conversations with the mayor, he let me know that the overarching issue with the sandwich board sign is that we've set very prescriptive regulations in our zoning ordinance that are relative or are essentially unenforceable because they regulate content rather than just time, manner, and size of the sign and all that thing. So that made sense to me. When I was looking at the general ordinance, I was a little bit confused because it seemed like there's a lot missing there. Like it's just it doesn't talk about any of the same things that are in the zoning ordinance. So that was a little bit confusing to me. So, you know, I think that there's a clear path forward with, or it seems like there's a clear path forward with streamlining the zoning ordinance, but I also think that part of that would require, and maybe Allison would have additional information on this or could correct me, but it seems like our general ordinance would also need to be updated to make sure that everything is enforceable. But yeah, that was just a big question mark that I was having with this.
May I?
Yeah.
Hey everyone, Allison, planning director. So no one has communicated with me about the sandwich board sign issues or ordinances, so I'm not, honestly not fully up to speed on what the concerns are. I mean, I just listening to you, I'm getting the drift that, there was in the last few years a ruling by the SJC related to sign content and how far cities can go in regulating that. So, I mean, I'm happy to review it from that lens, but I think it also would be good to talk with the building commissioner since he's usually the one that enforces the sign ordinance and deals with it regularly. The planning department really doesn't deal with signs. So I'm not as familiar with it.
And when I had originally brought this up, it was a conversation with the previous mayor. And what I understood from that conversation, but it feels like the conversation has now shifted a little bit. But from her, or from my take from what she was talking about, it had to do with the accessibility, but also it had to do with, I'm not using the right word, but accessibility in terms of it being affordable or reasonable for businesses to be able to have a sandwich board sign. And so that was kind of just the beginning of that conversation with her. So folks never got to it because I think we were working on it.
Yeah, no, I saw in your initial request for or city council action request, sure, access and safety review of permits and fees to ensure they don't create an undue burden on local businesses, which I think makes a lot of sense. Yep, Allison. Or planning director, Daniel.
So I'm sorry, my daughter's screaming if you can hear her. I'm so sorry. Hang on.
That's what it is. And you hadn't have anything else? I don't know if anyone else has thoughts about kind of moving forward. Yeah.
I tend to lean in the direction of taking a step back and looking at it more broadly because and the mayor was just repeating this to me at our meeting earlier today that I think the whole sign ordinance section in the zoning is really messy and I think there are other areas that some of the concerns would apply to that just we haven't caught yet. So to me, I was thinking process-wise, it would make sense to remove this specific item from our agenda and come back with a more like a wholesome or a holistic review of zoning and general ordinance related to signs.
And hopefully it'll be wholesome. Can you put that in the notes? I did, yeah.
Allison?
Yeah, I did want to clarify if there was any, so you're mentioning cost, if there's a requirement that they get like a license or something from the city to have it on a public sidewalk. I just want to make sure that I understand like the full scope of what the committee is interested in sort of exploring.
So my understanding was that it had to be permitted. So, and then they also had to, it also, in terms of kind of managing it was only supposed to be displayed during days of operation, days and hours of operation. But again, on Union Street, they're out there all the time. And so I think that's the enforcement piece, but also kind of the permitting and
And I think for me, there's a disconnect with, and what I mentioned with the city ordinance or the general ordinance versus the zoning ordinance. Like the general ordinance does put a requirement that anyone who wants to put a sign that's at all obstructing a public way, you need to get, I think our general ordinance says that you need to get a license from the Board of Public Works. And then in our zoning ordinance, it lays out a bunch of additional requirements, but then it says that it's like the zoning board of appeals that has to approve any sort of exceptions to the rule, and that it's the zoning enforcement officer that enforces all of it. So that's where I think that there's just some like harmonizing that needs to be done to make sure that we're having it a very simple, straightforward, like this is who you go to get the license. Here's who's in charge of the fines. Here's who's enforcing it. But I think that right now it's a little bit confusing from my understanding.
Yeah. This is proof of insurance also. There has to be insurance.
Yeah, so I will say, I think the nuance here is that, zoning typically deals with private property and signs on private property, whereas the sandwich board signs are more often than not on public sidewalks. And that's where you get into the, annual license and insurance requirements, since it's, it's in the public right of way. And there are, some communities don't even allow them because they, the issues with accessibility, in particular, but also because they can blow away or cause other sort of safety hazards. So the insurance definitely, I can see why that's required. But I'm happy to, kind of look at everything comprehensively.
Also, I'm thinking again of Union Streets, size. If there's size requirements, because on that particular sidewalk, it can feel a little narrow. I mean, I can get by there and the dog can get by there, but it gets really tight. So I don't know.
In a scooter or a wheelchair.
Or anything like that. Or I'm thinking about a kid with a strollers. Yes, thank you. I think that creates more of a, and I'm often, personally, one of them, it often blows over and I often pick it up in the morning and lean it up against the building because it's just laying in the sidewalk, right? So I don't know what those requirements are either in terms of it being stable and not, yeah, I don't know what the weight requirements are so that it doesn't fall over.
Yeah, I think this is one of these issues that to just not address it if we know that there are some businesses that are not following and some businesses that are, that's just going to create a difference as to who can attract customers in what manner. So definitely want to be consistent for everybody.
Yeah, to be fair.
So I guess I'm happy to work on this with Allison or with the planning department and come back to the committee with more information. Or I know that we're going to have to go through the process of submitting a new business item and all that. I can manage that. But, just want to make sure that that process makes sense.
Yeah, so we can make a motion to remove this if it's going to be embedded in a larger sign ordinance. So
We do that now.
Motion to remove without
yeah, so we
prejudice.
can remove it without prejudice, and then for the next meeting, create a new item, and then we'll remove the other one and add this one in its place
We would have to remove it without prejudice at full council
as well. But we can remove it here and there. So
Okay. So I guess then I would entertain a motion to recommend that full council remove this item without prejudice. The action request related to sandwich board signs in the city and zoning ordinance.
so we'll
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thank you. That was sufficient. I feel like one of four. All right. So the other things on our list, is there anything that is jumping out?
So the cannabis, if you want me to speak to that. So it was a submitted item. I'll be fully transparent. This is the one that I submitted is what Boston uses. And obviously it needs work, but I just used it as a template to be able to show what they are doing. I think there's a lot of things in there that I need to talk to the mayor about in terms of setting up a cannabis commission to address this, figuring out, we need to figure out what department that this is going to be housed within. I think that, so there's just a lot of work that needs to continue to be kind of put in this, but that's kind of where we are, or where I am with this, just in general, of trying to get this going, because this was a request from the mayor, and it was an item that the previous mayor had also said that we are basically trying to get the city into compliance, because this is something that we have to have. So just trying to kind of work through that, but just so you all know, because it cites various MGL that we need to follow, etc. It was just a good template to follow. So I will follow up with the mayor, because I think there's a number of things. One, the board needs to be set up. Also, stuff here.
Could we, just for the public, and I think for my own, because I'm not sure that I fully understand how they're separated, could you talk about if this is different from the social consumption conversation that's been happening at the state level? Because I've heard a lot of people tying these things together. Like this is us pushing for social consumption in Easthampton, but I know that that's not necessarily what this is.
I don't know that, and that's a conversation I can have with the mayor. My understanding was that, and he provided an outline of what is expected within the ordinance, and so that's really kind of where I just started to get this into city council, but I could go back and have another conversation with him about that, but I can't speak to that at this time.
Okay. I spoke briefly.
It sounds like Allison.
Yeah, so again, no one's really communicated with me specifically about this, so I'm not positive of the relationship of between the two that you've been hearing, but I can say that my understanding is that the social consumption licenses will be limited to equity applicants for at least the first, I don't know if it's the first year but there's like a sort of a timeline for how long it will only be available to those social equity applicants. So I think having a definition and probably a framework in place would help if the city did want to move forward with allowing social consumption.
Okay. So this is sort of a prerequisite, not necessarily a first step.
The state does, however, require, aside from the social consumption, does require communities to have adopted like an equity policy related to any cannabis licensing or, well, regulation, I guess you could say, in the city. So it isn't only tied to the social consumption, but I think it will be particularly relevant if we move forward with that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you for that clarification. That's definitely helpful. So sorry, I interrupted you when you were.
No, I think that this is just really kind of the first step in getting those, but also, like I said, I think it also requires us to establish a board, etc. So I think that those are things that we have to do, and we also have to figure out which department this is gonna sit within, etc. So I think there's a number of things.
How would we define social equity? I mean, it could be someone who was previously arrested for distributing.
I think that it's in here. It's related.
I think the first mention, or I don't know if this is the only definition of equity that it gives, but I think it alludes to it in the first section of purpose. It says to encourage full participation in the marijuana industry by individuals from communities that were disproportionately harmed by marijuana prohibition and enforcement.
Yep. So the Cannabis Control Commission has like specific social equity programs, and I assume the definition is sort of derived from their regulations.
Definitions: area of disproportionate impact means a geographic area identified by the Easthampton Cannabis Board or the CCC of the state, which has had historically high rates of arrest, conviction, and incarceration related to marijuana crimes between 1971 and 2016. That's a little bit more specific.
I'm honestly curious if we have the records of arrests for seeing if we have enough to establish that there was enough of a here that.
The state previously did maintain a list of communities that I can't remember if it was communities or census tracts that qualified as disproportionately impacted. So I have not looked into it during my time in Easthampton because it hasn't come up, but in my previous employment, I did deal with that a little bit. So like I said, there was a database that enabled you to determine, and it was sort of like pre-established by the state so that the city wouldn't necessarily be going through arrest records.
All right, so I can dig into this more.
Okay.
So
Did you have more questions?
No, I find it really interesting though.
I have one question / idea to just put out there. I was really impressed by the process with the wetlands ordinance and how there was like info sessions and like listening sessions. And I've gotten feedback from us scheduling the rent control listening sessions that like you should do more of this. So I just want to put it out there that I think it would be a really cool idea once we have something drafted to do that sort of outreach.
yeah, I think this committee in particular, there's a lot of opportunity of working with other committees. And I think there's a lot of great opportunity of working and outreach to the community around needs or et cetera, and certainly working with various departments as well. Right? So I think that there's some real opportunity to have some community engagement around this. And I'm thinking about the CRC, for example. This might be a really cool opportunity of kind of working with them to get some. Now that they have a quorum and that they can begin to have those conversations again, I think there's a lot of opportunity in that.
That's also a really good point. It's like the Conservation Commission was so involved with that process.
Yep.
I know we have so many well-staffed boards and committees to help us with all this stuff. So.
And we can even share this with them and say, you know, we want your take on this, blah, blah, blah. So. I can also just address briefly the residency requirements. So I shared this, but also I was thinking about what's happening with the appointments committee. Are you also, or have, it's convenient that you're here, have you also been talking about residency, or I feel like it's come up in your report out?
This came up for the Council of Aging.
Yeah.
So in the Council of Aging, they were saying that they couldn't find anybody within Easthampton that would be willing to replace someone on the board.
Yes.
And the person was moving to Westhampton as willing to still sit on the board, even though they wouldn't be in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought this up to the full city council about whether or not we should allow for appointments outside the city.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been determined, at least for that particular board, that outside the city would be okay. But it's inconsistent throughout the rest of the boards and committees for some that will allow for outside and some who won't. And usually it's what the person knows that can be from outside. You know, if it's just a membership committee that doesn't require a particular skill set, then we could say within the city of Easthampton. But for some things that we're looking for, they need someone who really understands it from that skill set. So I don't know. does that mean that we try harder to find volunteers from the city of Easthampton? Because I think that can be one possibility. Another one would be, okay, let's ask people's professional networks, since this is a, a skilled issue that we're talking about. But the one thing is that you don't want to have so many people from outside residency being able to kind of infiltrate and take over a board that really serves the city of Easthampton rather than other surrounding communities. And so for that one, we ended up saying that they were only allowed to be 1/3 of the board from a neighboring community. But I thought that was kind of arbitrary. And whether or not we would want to make a blanket policy for every boarding committee on that basis seems a little putting policy where we don't really need to have a formal policy, I think.
Because I remember the council, because they came in here and they changed their ordinance or whatever. And so then at that point we talked about exploring this, right? But that was the concern, I think, of outside people.
Yeah.
So I think we were gonna, if I remember now correctly, it's been a while since we looked at this originally, was to go in and find out if some of these other ones had requirements, etc. So I think I need to go back and just kind of get in here and look to see if there's specific things, so I can again dig into this a little bit more.
As chair of appointments, I'd be happy to take that on. As chair of appointments, I would be happy to give us that information.
Yeah.
I already have it in the manuals for appointments, and there's no reason that you should have to do that.
Okay, so maybe I can take a look at that and then. And you did all of them? Or all of them? Did you?
There are a few boards and committees that people assume are part of the city, but actually aren't. So one of them is like the community gardens. That's actually part of the conservation commission. So it's not, you know what I mean? It's not a membership that's going through the mayor's office in the same way. So there are a few little ones like that.
Yes, and they were very concerned about having to have their meetings recorded or not recorded, and
Yeah.
So why don't I get that from you, and then we can have another discussion at the next meeting about any of those kind of pieces. So I'll get that from you.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think the questions that you bring up are really good ones. It's like I could find myself leaning either way.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing on our agenda is the Ordinance Review Committee's final report. I know that there's a lot there. I didn't know. Did I volunteer to take this one?
I think so.
Okay. Well, if that's the
I need to
case,
go back and
that's
look at it.
that's on me to go through. I need to determine what of these things we've already done.
Yeah, so just also context, this was prior to both of us being on the committee. This was previous membership that had done this, and this was kind of their report. And then actually, I think it had been removed from the agenda, and we brought it back because we had so many other things. So coming back to this to address those things, but so that's at least 2 years old now, I guess. And so I don't even know if there's more things in there that need to be looked at or thought about. Or
I mean, part of me wants to just work through this, like either, sitting down one-on-one with Dylan or Allison and just being like, what is realistic? What do we actually want? And plucking them out and just submitting those as individual items. Because it feels very overwhelming, and kind of because it's all over the place, there's not really an anchor for us to, I think, like center our conversation around. It just feels like with the housing partnership zoning recommendations, like it's going to take just someone going through the whole ordinance and track changing it all. And so I'm happy to do that work. And I think I meant to do this before and then everything.
Things happened.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so you'll work on that.
Yeah, I'll work on this more.
Can we just go back to the cannabis?
Yeah.
Equity Allison, if you're there, is this something? Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Is this something that has sat within planning boards? If this is something that you worked on at your previous position, is this a ordinance that sits within the planning, or that we partner with the planning? Or I'm just trying to get an understanding of who I should kind of.
So the social equity requirements were adopted well after the law changed allowing adult use cannabis establishments. So I never dealt with it in the context that we're talking about now. It was more like the social equity designation has always existed, but there weren't requirements around it per se. So I was aware of the social equity designation and, applicants that qualified under that. And I think we had some special exemptions that they weren't subject to the same like buffer requirements and what have you. But like I said, it's somewhat newer. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. It's a somewhat newer requirement that hasn't come up since my time in Easthampton and didn't come up in the time in the other communities. So I can't say for sure if it's something normally the planning board deals with. I will say there was a lot of chatter in planning like forums in the state about this and about the requirements. So the Mass Municipal Association and KP Law, which is one of the bigger municipal focused law firms in the state, did sort of do some educational outreach on it, and it doesn't have to be an ordinance. There just needs to be a policy, which we do have a policy related to it. It sounds like the city of Boston has sort of taken it to a further degree than what is required by the state regulations around this. So I'm not as familiar with that and where it's housed and necessarily how that is handled.
Okay, so I'll talk to the mayor then, because he was the one who wanted the ordinance. So, but if we already have a policy, then maybe this is something that we have to do more of, or.
Yeah, so it's sort of like, I mean, it's literally just a policy. It's not something that was ever, I think, like vetted in any detail. But it just kind of checks the boxes to make sure that we're complying with the state. But again, we've not had any applications since these requirements went into effect. So there just was never a lot of attention given to it. But yeah, I do think a conversation with the mayor about his goals and objectives makes a lot of sense. And particularly, again, around the social consumption, because I think that does add a different sort of layer to this that makes it more relevant and important to have something, I think, more formal established if we do want to move forward with that. So yeah, like I said, unfortunately, I've not been in the loop on these conversations. So I'm kind of coming in with just my own peripheral knowledge of what's going on elsewhere in the state.
Okay.
That knowledge is incredibly valuable. So
Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
Happy to share.
I'm gonna go ask Allison.
All right.
Okay, so I will reach out to the mayor and find out, because I do feel like a basis of the conversation was we have to be in compliance. And so if we have a policy, then does that mean we're in compliance? Or is he looking for something beyond that?
Yeah. Well, let me know if I can be helpful at all in that. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, and not necessarily to have a long discussion about it, but both to remind or just put into the public record, the public hearings on May 20th for the wetlands ordinance and the sections 1 through 4 partnership zoning stuff. And then building off of the housing partnership zoning stuff, I had met with Ben and the housing partnership over the last couple of weeks and talked about sort of next steps and where they want to advocate moving forward on some of the zoning recommendations. And we came up with a list of the sort of low-hanging fruit that I think makes a lot of sense and is somewhat, I think, attainable, digestible as like either sending them piecemeal or sending them as another package. So I will be prepared to come to the next meeting with a representative from, or a couple from the housing partnership to have that discussion. So that'll be on the agenda at the next meeting.
Great.
And that our next meeting is May 26th at 6 p.m. in this room.
Has there been any other, I know we were talking with the aquifer and Patty, I think, was putting forward. Is there any progress been made on that? I think she was applying for a grant, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Has she heard anything?
So my recollection was that we wouldn't know until like November.
Oh, no.
October. Allison, am I correct?
Yeah, that sounds about right. So the grant was due, I think, in like mid-March. And it's this particular grant, the MVP grant, typically notifications go out in the fall.
Oh, okay.
May 26th at 6 o'clock.
Yeah. All right. And I am appreciative of a quick meeting. Is there anything else that we want to add or talk about while we're here and while we have all the stuff posted on the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Exceptions? Right. Thank you, guys.
Than our local cable subscribers.